Hey everyone. Welcome to Anime Dreams, your go-to spot for fanfics, theories, and anime deep dives. Today's fanfic topic is, Naruko is a black shinobi. Get ready for a fresh twist on the Naruto universe. Disclaimer, this content is purely for entertainment and discussion. I do not own any of the anime footage used, all rights go to their rightful creators and copyright holders. Alright, let's dive in. Kyubi sat quietly within the sealed space, gently tapping her claws on the floor. She was examining Naruko's unique DNA, scrolling through the threads of heritage that made up the young girl's lineage. At the moment, she was feeling a bit bored, nothing particularly captivating had caught her attention. Other than her parents, this girl doesn't seem to have any standout ancestors, Kyubi mused aloud, her tone one of slight frustration. If I don't find something interesting soon, I might just lose my mind from boredom. That's when something caught her attention, a curious fragment of genetic material from one of Naruko's distant ancestors. It was unlike anything she had seen in a long time, radiating an unusual kind of energy. Kyubi leaned in, her curiosity now piqued. Within the memory encoded in that DNA, she saw a man clad in a dark jacket with a bold red design, hood drawn, stepping bravely toward an approaching group of armored soldiers. Though they tried to hold him back with all kinds of tools and weapons, they couldn't stop him. His body transformed, arms grew in strength, with tendrils and shapes forming tools and armor. He moved with precision and power, using his abilities to defend himself and outmaneuver the challenges before him. He could shape his body into protective gear and extend his reach with surprising control. His actions were quick and strategic, more like a high-energy performance than a battle. Kyubi blinked, intrigued. Now that is a unique ability. She delved deeper, discovering another ancestor, this one from a world of advanced technology and wonder. The memory showed a man wielding shimmering energy weapons, surrounded by futuristic machines and airborne figures. He controlled energy with ease, creating glowing blades, lifting objects without touching them, guiding people's actions, and even creating shields of pure force. These techniques weren't chakra-based, but something older and perhaps deeper. This, Kyubi said with a knowing smile, is going to help Naruko tremendously. With focused intent, Kyubi began channeling chakra into Naruko's body, carefully weaving the abilities into her DNA. She also created additional energy pathways, coils designed to let Naruko harness this mysterious energy known as the Force. While this was happening, Naruko stirred in her sleep. She felt warmth in her limbs and flashes of memories that weren't hers. Her body was changing subtly, taller, stronger, more capable, but Kyubi ensured she remained calm through it all, deepening her sleep to make the experience easier. The next morning, Naruko woke up groggily, squinting against the sunlight streaming through her window. Ugh! Why is it so bright today? She muttered, stumbling out of bed toward the bathroom. She yawned and looked in the mirror, and nearly jumped back in surprise. The reflection staring back wasn't what she expected. Her body had grown slightly, her muscles a bit more defined, her posture straighter. Her whisker marks were still there, though softer. But what really caught her attention were her eyes. The whites had darkened, and her irises glowed faintly red, with a slit pupil, a side effect of Kyubi's chakra enhancing her senses. What is going on? Naruko whispered, reaching up to touch her face. Startled but curious, she wandered into the kitchen, still trying to make sense of everything. She didn't notice the chair behind her and tripped, landing with a thump. She winced and looked at her arm. A scratch had formed, but before her eyes, small, red-black strands gently healed the wound in moments. She stared. Wait. That was in the dream I had last night. She raised her arm, focusing. Slowly, tendrils of dark energy began wrapping around her arm, forming a dense, muscular shape. She remembered the term from her vision, muscle form. She brought her transformed arm down gently on the table. With minimal effort, the wood cracked. Naruko blinked, a smile spreading across her face. She turned her arm back to normal and reached out toward a nearby chair. With a bit of focus, it began to hover. She gasped with delight and sent it across the room into the wall, no damage done, but enough to confirm what she could do. Okay, she said softly, this is amazing. I need to train and learn to use this. She glanced at her old outfit and wrinkled her nose. Bright orange suddenly didn't feel right anymore. Her closet didn't have much else, and buying new clothes was always a challenge since most shopkeepers didn't treat her well. But she had an idea. With a puff of smoke, she used a transformation jutsu to appear as a regular young woman with smooth black hair and calm brown eyes, wearing simple, everyday clothes. Disguised, Naruko made her way to the clothing store. For once, No one gave her strange looks or turned her away. She browsed peacefully, finally choosing a pair of loose jeans, a red top, and a sleek black jacket. She even grabbed a pair of sunglasses for fun. After paying without issue, she ducked into a quiet alley to return to her true form and slipped into her new outfit. As she walked through the village, Naruko noticed people glancing her way. It wasn't the usual coldness or suspicion, just curiosity. Maybe her new confidence was showing. Her eyes caught a sign with 2 crossed swords, clearly a weapon shop. She remembered the energy blades from her dream. She knew she wouldn't be able to recreate them yet, but perhaps a regular sword would help her practice until she was ready. Inside, the shop was filled with an impressive variety of weapons. A kind-looking older man stood behind the counter and smiled warmly. "Hello there, young lady. Looking for something special?" he asked kindly. "Yes," Naruko said with a thoughtful look, "I'm not sure you'll have it, but I'm looking for a very unique kind of sword." "A unique sword?" the man asked with interest. "What kind?" "A sword made of light," Naruko said softly, with a colored glow. "It's hard to explain." The man chuckled. "Well, I can't say I have anything like that, but I do have some excellent replicas and energy-style designs. Want to take a look?" Naruko nodded. "That sounds perfect. Thank you." The man stood silently. Naruko felt a little uncertain. Was he just eccentric? He glanced around, then gestured for her to follow. Naruko hesitated for a moment before stepping after him. The two entered a back room, and what Naruko saw made her eyes widen in surprise. The walls were lined with all kinds of curious-looking devices. Tools, mechanical instruments, and larger contraptions that seemed like they belonged in an advanced workshop. "Are these the swords you mentioned?" the man asked, pointing to a pedestal, pulling Naruko's attention back. On the pedestal were 2 aged cylindrical objects, worn but unmistakably familiar to her. "Yes," Naruko said, amazed. "I'm surprised you actually have them." "My family," the man said, "has been around for generations. One of our ancestors, I believe his name was Stark, was known for crafting tools like these. We've been preserving equipment from long ago. These are some of the oldest we have, but I think I can get them working again." "That's great," Naruko said. "Do you think you could make an adjustment for me?" "Certainly," the man replied, pulling out a notepad as if from nowhere. "What did you have in mind?" "Well," Naruko explained, "I've learned that the color variations of the blades have different effects. I want to become a skilled ninja, but switching out parts manually might slow me down. I was hoping you could design a feature to change the colors at the press of a button." The man scratched his chin thoughtfully. I believe that's possible. But how do you know all this? Most people have never even seen weapons like these." Naruko hesitated, then gave a soft sigh. She decided to explain, at least the part about her dreams and the glowing colors of the blades. When she finished, she noticed the man looking at her curiously. "You're not the first I've heard of this happening to," he said calmly. "Sometimes, a weapon seems to resonate with someone. It's like they're drawn to each other. From what you've described, I think these swords were meant for you." Relieved that he wasn't dismissing her, Naruko smiled slightly. "Thanks. While I wait for the modifications, could I get a pair of regular training swords? I want to get used to using them properly first." Finally, a young person with good sense, the man said approvingly. "Head back out to the store. I think I've got something you'll like." Naruko stepped back out front and waited by the counter. After a few minutes, the man returned with a bundle wrapped in cloth. He opened it to reveal 2 beautifully crafted katana swords. The blades were deep black, and the handles were elegantly shaped, designed for both comfort and precision. "These haven't responded to anyone else," the man said. "But if those other swords called to you, maybe these will too." Naruko gently touched the handles, then picked up the swords. They felt perfectly balanced in her hands, as if they belonged there. She grinned with satisfaction. "How much do I owe you?" she asked. "Well, since fixing and upgrading those other blades will take time, consider these a gift," he replied with a kind smile. "It's the least I can do." Naruko bowed her head slightly and, "Thanks," then left the store, the swords crisscrossed in sheaths on her back. That girl, the man thought, she doesn't deserve the way people treat her in this village. Later that day, Naruko came across an old, unused training ground and began practicing. Swinging the swords felt natural, but she quickly realized mastering them wouldn't be easy. She really needed a sparring partner. Just as she was packing up, loud voices caught her attention. She followed the sound and came upon an unusual group, Two boys with large eyebrows, identical bowl-cut hairstyles, wearing green jumpsuits with orange leg warmers, a quiet boy dressed in brown with pale eyes, and a girl in a pink top with her hair styled in two buns. The pale-eyed boy stood abruptly. "Someone's watching us." "I'll handle it," the girl said, pulling out a kunai and tossing it toward Naruko's hiding spot. Naruko dodged out of the way and stepped forward. "Hey, easy," Naruko said calmly. "I just got this outfit." "Why were you watching us?" the boy asked. "Who are you? Isn't it polite to introduce yourself first?" Naruko replied with a sly smile, making the boy frown slightly. "Neji," the bun-haired girl said, sighing. "Sorry about that. I'm Tenten. This is Lee, and that's Guy-sensei." "Nice to meet you, friend," Lee exclaimed cheerfully, offering his hand. Naruko shook it without hesitation. Again, Neji asked, "Why were you watching us?" "I thought this place was abandoned," Naruko explained. "I came here to train with these." She unsheathed her new swords, and Tenten's eyes sparkled with admiration. "They're beautiful," she said, reaching out to touch one. Naruko gently moved her hand away. "They're mine," she said playfully, pointing to herself with a thumb. Tenten pouted, folding her arms with a huff. "You know," Naruko said, "I could use a sparring partner. I'm working on a new style that blends taijutsu and swordsmanship." "Really?" Lee asked, eyes wide with interest. "What styles are they?" "I call them the Black Fist style and the Light Blade style," Naruko said. The names felt right, reflecting power and speed. "I've never heard of those," Guy-sensei said, raising a thick brow. "Did you create them yourself?" Naruko nodded. "Well then," Guy said with excitement, "let's see how they stand up against my student." Lee beamed and stepped into a ready stance. Naruko handed her swords to Tenten, who carefully held them. Both moved to clear space, and Guy raised his hand. "Ready. Fight." Lee dashed forward with incredible speed. Naruko barely had time to react and brought her arm up to block his punch. But she was caught off guard by a follow-up kick that sent her sliding back slightly. She steadied herself and rubbed her side. "Wow," Naruko said, impressed, "you're strong." Lee grinned and came at her again. This time, Naruko was ready. She sidestepped his charge and landed a quick strike that knocked Lee off balance. "But so am I," she said, smiling confidently. Lee stood, brushing off his uniform with an eager grin, clearly enjoying the match. Finally, Lee said with a determined grin, "I have an opponent to test my limits." Lee charged forward again, and this time Naruko matched his speed, surprising everyone watching. The two exchanged quick, focused strikes, showing impressive agility and strength. Naruko delivered a sharp uppercut to Lee's chin, sending him airborne. She leapt after him, landing a few more well-placed blows before bringing her fists down in a powerful motion that sent Lee back to the ground with a heavy thump. Naruko landed with graceful precision, calm and composed. Some of the techniques she had used seemed to come from dreams she had recently experienced, her instincts guiding her with unexpected skill. Lee rose slowly, holding his arm and wincing slightly from the impact. He looked up at Naruko with genuine admiration. "You are indeed a strong opponent," Lee said sincerely. "What is your name?" "Naruko," the blonde replied confidently. "Thanks for the match," Naruko said with a light smile. "That was fun. We should train together again sometime." Lee nodded respectfully and walked back to his team. "See you around," Naruko called out. "I've got somewhere I need to be." "Bye, Naruko." Tenten waved after her with a cheerful smile. All the while, Neji observed with quiet curiosity. With his Byakugan active, he noticed something unusual about Naruko. She had two distinct chakra networks, one was normal, while the other was different, flowing more freely and with a strange quality. He wasn't even sure it could be called regular chakra. Neji made a mental note, Naruko was someone to watch closely in the future. Later, Naruko sat cross-legged on her couch at home, deep in meditation. She had remembered from her dream that she needed to deepen her connection with something called the Force. After hours of focus, she was now able to levitate herself and the couch beneath her. She sensed a presence enter the room, a quiet flicker in the energy around her. Lowering herself in the couch gently, she opened her eyes. "Do you need something?" Naruko asked calmly. An Anbu appeared, cloaked in shadows. "The Hokage wishes to see you," he said before disappearing in a swirl of leaves. Naruko stood up and headed for the door. Instead of taking the usual path, she took to the rooftops. She gathered energy into her legs, and tendrils of red and black light began to flicker around them. With a burst of speed, she jumped onto a nearby building and began sprinting across rooftops, her agility and grace leaving onlookers stunned. No one had seen someone move quite like that before. Naruko soon spotted the Hokage's tower and launched herself into the air, landing at the entrance with a soft boom that echoed slightly. She walked inside. She was quickly noticed by the secretary, who frowned. "What are you doing here, girl?" the woman said curtly. "Leave before I call Anbu." Naruko narrowed her eyes slightly behind her sunglasses. She calmly raised a hand, and the woman floated slightly into the air, letting out a startled yelp. Inside his office, the Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, heard the noise. A moment later, the door was flung open and his startled secretary stumbled in. Naruko stepped into the doorway. "Hello," she said evenly. The secretary screamed and bolted from the office, muttering something about spirits and running far down the hall. "Naruko," Hiruzen said, smiling despite the scene, "I'm glad you came." "What's going on, old man?" Naruko asked with casual familiarity. "Did something happen?" "I saw what you did earlier. You've developed impressive abilities in a short time. Would you be willing to explain how?" Naruko shrugged and explained her recent dreams, where she had learned to harness new powers. She removed her sunglasses, revealing glowing eyes that caused the Hokage to sit up in surprise. She described the strange sensations and instincts that guided her. "The Nine Tails," Hiruzen thought to himself. Perhaps it's awakened something new in her. The potential could be immense. "Naruko," he said aloud, "would you demonstrate these abilities for me?" "Sure," Naruko agreed. "But we should probably go to a training ground for that." A short time later, they stood at a training field. Hiruzen created several shadow clones. "All right," he said, "show me what you can do." Naruko nodded. She moved faster than the eye could follow, closing the distance to the clones in a flash. She shifted her form slightly, transforming one arm into a claw-like structure. With precise movements, she swept through the clones, dissipating them one after another. She then changed her arm into a long, whip-like appendage, lashing out and pulling a clone toward her. Her hand briefly connected with the clone's chest, and a web of red energy flowed from her touch. She closed her eyes briefly as new information passed through her mind, details about the clone's formation, chakra usage, and techniques. Regaining focus, Naruko shifted her arms again, now into powerful, muscular forms. She charged forward, effortlessly dispersing more clones with sheer force. She formed a hammer-like fist and brought it down, neutralizing another clone in a powerful strike. One remaining clone tossed kunai at her in a defensive reaction. Naruko created a shield with her enhanced arm, easily blocking the incoming weapons. Then, forming a blade with her free hand, she dashed forward and swiftly eliminated the final clone. Sarutobi watched, deeply impressed by her discipline and control. Naruko stood calmly, her energy stable, a quiet determination in her eyes. Naruko shifted her arms back to their normal position. She glanced at the last of the clones. Sarutobi thought that might be the end of it when he saw Naruko extend her hand toward the clones. Suddenly, one of the clones began clutching its throat and was lifted into the air. Naruko extended her other hand, and a powerful bolt of lightning shot from her fingertips, striking the clone. The clone's body crackled with electricity before it vanished in a puff of smoke. Naruko wasn't finished yet. She drew both her swords, her gaze focused on the remaining two clones. With a swift motion, she threw both swords, sending them spinning like sharp projectiles. Naruko used the force of her will to make them spin rapidly, and they both connected with one clone, cutting it cleanly. The swords then turned in mid-air and returned to her, which she expertly caught. Sarutobi noticed Naruko wince slightly. She sheathed the swords and shook her hand. "Note to self," Naruko said, "be more careful with that move." "Naruko," Sarutobi said, coming out of his stupor. "I must say, that was impressive." "Thanks, old man," Naruko replied, "though there's still more I need to figure out. I'm still learning, so I don't have all the advanced techniques down yet." "Naruko," Sarutobi said, "can anyone else do this?" "No," Naruko said. "I don't think so." "Why?" "Because," Sarutobi began, "I believe I can classify these as bloodlines." "Bloodlines?" Naruko asked. Though she wasn't the best student, she was far from being unobservant. "What do you mean by that?" "Yes," Sarutobi continued, "these are abilities that seem to be unique, possibly due to a mutation in your DNA. I think I can categorize them into two separate abilities." "Really?" Naruko asked. Yes, Sarutobi said, pulling out a notebook. And since you are the first to possess these abilities, you get to name them. Naruko was quiet for a moment, thinking deeply about the names. Since these abilities were hers, she felt it was only fitting to give them names that reflected their uniqueness. The first one I'll call the prototype, bloodline, Naruko said. Not exactly a fancy name, Sarutobi said, why choose something like that? From what I understand, Naruko explained, these abilities will continue to evolve, always changing and adapting. Alright, Sarutobi said, jotting it down, and the other one? I'll call it the Star Killer bloodline, Naruko said, crossing her arms with a thoughtful look. Okay, Sarutobi said, writing down the information. I'll have these classified as new bloodlines by morning. In the meantime, you might want to get some rest. Your final day at the academy is tomorrow. Naruko nodded, grateful for the encouragement. She then sprinted home, a sense of excitement building within her. As she ran, Sarutobi watched, knowing that things in the Hidden Leaf Village were about to become much more interesting. Naruko woke up from her sleep. Kyubi had sent her a few more visions during the night. The images showed a prototype, individuals sending out massive waves of tendrils at enemies. She saw the same technique, but this time with spikes coming up from the ground. Another vision displayed Star Killer using the force to lift large objects, even bringing down a massive ship on top of a base, all while managing to survive. Naruko woke up, washed her face, ate some toast with scrambled eggs and bacon, then headed out to the academy. As she walked toward the academy, a strange scent reached her nose. She recognized it as blood. Her heart sank as she noticed the scent coming from a small patch of woods. Naruko's instincts kicked in, and she felt an uneasy sense of foreboding as she made her way to the area. Naruko arrived and was taken aback with shock. In front of her lay a family of foxes, all lifeless. Among them was a small blonde baby fox, the only one still alive. A group of civilians and a few ninja, about Chunin in rank, stood around the small creature. They were armed with makeshift weapons such as knives and pipes. Naruko's anger flared when she saw one of the men raise the pipe to strike the fox. Something inside her snapped. What do you think you're doing? Naruko shouted in fury. The group turned to her, initially surprised, but their expressions quickly shifted to anger and disdain. We're finishing off this fox, one civilian yelled. And then we're coming after you. The man's voice trailed off as he felt an overwhelming presence of killing intent emanating from Naruko. Everyone stopped, sensing the pressure. Red chakra surrounded her, and her sunglasses shattered, revealing eyes glowing black and red. Your actions will have consequences, she growled. With that, Naruko disappeared. The civilians assumed she had run off to fetch the Hokage. If we can't deal with her, one civilian said, raising a pitchfork, then we'll just have to deal with this little fox. He turned to see that the fox was no longer there. His eyes searched around, then upwards, where two figures of Naruko hovered in the air. One held the fox under her arm, while the other remained grounded. Naruko landed in the center of the group. She focused her energy, and the second Naruko retreated to a safe distance. The group stared, wide-eyed, until Naruko let out a fierce cry. Devastator, tendril burst. A massive surge of tendrils erupted from Naruko's body. Each one struck the group, incapacitating them before retreating back to her. After a few moments, Naruko fell to one knee, taking a deep breath to steady herself. She had managed to absorb a few of the Chunin's chakra before they fell. Luckily, the location was deep in the woods, far from prying eyes, so the incident remained unnoticed. Naruko had a feeling that the Hokage was watching, sensing that he might send Anbu to investigate the situation. Meanwhile, in the Hokage's office, Sarutobi sat in stunned silence as he processed the events. He was both surprised and impressed by Naruko's swift and efficient use of her powers. He realized that once she mastered these abilities, there would be no one who could stand against her, human or otherwise. The incident had also spared him the trouble of dispatching Anbu to deal with the situation. Back with Naruko and the little fox. The second Naruko approached the first and handed the fox over to her, then disappeared in a puff of smoke. During the earlier encounter, when Naruko absorbed a Sarutobi clone, she learned the Shadow Clone Jutsu. She had struggled with the basic clone jutsu, so mastering the Shadow Clone technique was a pleasant surprise. She also learned more about the fox, feeling betrayed that the Hokage had kept such information from her, but she would ask him about it later. Her thoughts were interrupted when the fox whimpered. Naruko quickly realized the fox was badly injured. Remembering the techniques in her prototype bloodline, she decided to help. She sent a bit of her biomass into the small fox, healing its wounds. The fox jumped up, yipping happily. Naruko smiled and petted it gently. Hey there, little one, Naruko said. Would you like to come with me? I could use a partner. The fox yipped again and licked Naruko's face. All right, little one, Naruko said with a grin. You're welcome to join me. The fox growled a little, and Naruko realized her mistake. Sorry, she said with a chuckle. Little girl, you can come with me. The fox jumped down and began walking beside her. Naruko then remembered she was running late for the academy. She quickly started running, and to her surprise, the fox kept pace with her. Wow, that biomass must work quickly, Naruko thought to herself as she sprinted ahead. Naruko made her way to the academy, her fox companion bounding alongside her. Together, they swiftly moved towards the building. As they ran, a few of the Jonin noticed her presence. That's her, Guy exclaimed to the others as he saw Naruko. That's the girl who defeated Lee yesterday. Really? Kurani Yuhi, a woman with black hair and red eyes, asked. I think that was Naruko. As in the dead last? Asuma asked, taking a drag from his cigarette. Well, that's impressive. A man wearing a mask and a headband over his left eye spoke up. I think the exam finals are today. Maybe we should see how much she's improved. The others nodded in agreement. They decided to head for the academy themselves. Naruko had just arrived at her classroom and walked inside. She took a seat, waiting for their instructor, Iruka, to arrive. While she sat, a boy with red marks on his cheeks and a small puppy approached her. Hey, Naruko. Kiba greeted. Nice look. Oh no, you're not going all emo on us, are you? No, Naruko replied, I just decided to change things up a bit. Dude, Kiba said, noticing her eyes, what happened to your glasses? Naruko remembered that her glasses had broken during her encounter with the civilians and Chunin. She had hoped to avoid the question, but now she had no choice. Can you keep a secret? Naruko asked. Kiba nodded, eager to hear more. I awakened a bloodline yesterday, Naruko confessed. I don't fully understand it yet, but I don't think I'll use it much until I know more about what it can do. It wasn't a complete lie. Naruko hadn't fully discovered all the abilities of her newfound power, just glimpses of them. Kiba nodded, noticing the fox pup but not thinking much of it. His own dog walked back with him to his desk, and the two sat down. Naruko wondered if she should reveal her new abilities today, but her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of shouting. Sakura Haruno and Ino Yamanaka had arrived, both bickering over who would sit next to Sasuke Uchiha. Sasuke, the self-assured class leader, often held a sense of superiority over others. Naruko smiled at the thought of outshining him. But, at the moment, she had grown tired of the shouting between Sakura and Ino. She decided to end it. Will you two quiet down? Naruko called out. The two girls turned to her, surprised. What did you say? Sakura asked, her voice tense. However, to her surprise, Naruko kept her eyes closed, remaining calm. I said, Naruko repeated, shut up. Sakura narrowed her eyes and, in frustration, drew back her arm and aimed a punch at Naruko. However, as her fist came into contact with Naruko's face, Sakura immediately recoiled, clutching her hand in pain. Naruko had used her abilities to harden her skin, absorbing the impact without feeling it. Is that all you've got? Naruko asked, her eyes opening to reveal a striking black and red hue that caused Sakura to falter, momentarily stunned. Ino, on the other hand, was captivated by the unusual color of her eyes. This, Naruko said as she pulled back her arm, is how it's done. Naruko's right hook landed squarely on Sakura's face, sending her flying across the room, crashing gently into the board at the front of the classroom. Sakura remained still, but did not fall through the wall. Everyone stared, shocked by Naruko's sudden display of strength. Hinata, from her seat, seemed pleased that Naruko had moved on from Sakura. Sasuke regarded Naruko with curiosity. He had never seen such power and wondered how Naruko had gained it. Before anyone could react further, two men entered the classroom. One was a tan man with brown hair and a scar across his nose, while the other was pale with silver hair. The first was Iruka, and the second was Mizuki, both of whom were the instructors for the class. Attention, students, Iruka said in a calm voice. Nobody listened. He then used his scary big head jutsu and yelled, quiet down, you troublesome brats. Naruko, slightly amused, wondered how Iruka managed to perform such a technique. Now, Iruka continued after settling down, it's time for the finals. Those of you who pass will become fully fledged ninja. First up, the written test. The class groaned. Iruka handed out the tests, and everyone began working. Sakura, having pried herself from the wall, glared at Naruko, but Naruko ignored her as she focused on the test. As she reviewed the questions, Naruko couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. A slight disturbance in her senses made her suspect that her test was being tampered with. Curious, she extended her abilities and started listening in on the thoughts of others. She soon discovered that while some of the students were answering questions, their answers didn't match up with hers. She focused on Iruka's thoughts. I hope Naruko passes this year, the scarred Chunin thought to himself. Naruko knew it wasn't Iruka causing the issue. So, she shifted her focus to Mizuki. With the genjutsu I placed on that brat's test, there's no way she'll pass. Once she fails, I can trick her into stealing the forbidden scroll, take the credit for it, and become a hero with the power of the scroll for myself. Naruko clenched her fist under the table. She couldn't expose Mizuki just yet, but she would make sure he paid for his treachery later. In the moment, she recalled a memory from a Chunin she had absorbed earlier when saving her fox. The memory provided crucial information about how to break free from a genjutsu. When caught in a genjutsu, there are two ways to free yourself. First, you can hurt yourself. Second, you can form a ram seal and say kai. This will break the genjutsu. Naruko formed a ram seal under the desk and whispered, kai. The moment she spoke, the test before her shifted, changing into the proper version. Smiling, Naruko began answering the questions. A few times, she had to tap into her memories to recall some answers, but she managed to finish it successfully. Once everyone had completed their tests, Iruka and Mizuki collected them. Okay, Iruka said, now that is done, let's head outside for the target and taijutsu portion of the test. The students got up and headed outside. Naruko's fox companion leapt onto her shoulder, and she smiled, feeling comforted by its presence. Outside, a few jonin were waiting for them. What are you all doing here? Mizuki asked. Oh, Kakashi replied, his nose still buried in his book, we came to watch this part of the test. It helps us know who to select for our teams. Iruka and Mizuki nodded in agreement. Once outside, the target portion of the test began. Naruko leaned against a tree and watched as one of the girls approached her. She was a brunette with green eyes. Hey, Naruko? The girl asked shyly. Yeah? Naruko replied. I was wondering, the girl began, fidgeting slightly, would you like to go out sometime? Naruko smiled kindly. Sorry, she said, I'm not looking for a relationship right now. The girl looked disappointed but smiled back, keeping her chin up before walking over to the group as it was her turn. Naruko. Iruka called. You're up next. Naruko grinned as she stepped up to the post. She heard a few people snicker as they saw her walk up. Some whispered, wondering if they'd get a good laugh. Naruko swiftly pulled out a few kunai and threw them at the target. To everyone's surprise, each one hit the bullseye. Everyone stared, their eyes wide with amazement. The jonin were also taken aback by her impressive display of skill. Naruko then decided to showcase some more of her abilities. She drew both of her swords. Many, especially a seasoned swordsman, watched closely at the twin blades. Naruko focused chakra into the swords, subtly adding a bit of force energy. The blades hummed faintly. Then, she threw them both with precision. To everyone's astonishment, the swords spun like saw blades, slicing through the target with ease. Using the force, she guided the blades to turn in midair and returned them to her hands. She caught them with grace. Iruka dropped the clipboard he had been using to keep score, and the onlookers appeared as if their jaws might unhinge. Naruko sheathed the swords and began to walk away when Sasuke approached her. Where did you get those swords? Sasuke asked, his tone carrying a sense of superiority. I got them at a weapons shop, Naruko said, crossing her arms. Why do you want to know? I want them, Sasuke replied. Sorry, but you can't have them, Naruko responded with a shrug. Dobi, Sasuke muttered, his voice carrying a challenge. I command you to. That's enough, a voice interrupted. Both Naruko and Sasuke turned to see a sickly man wearing a jonin uniform. I'm getting what's mine, Sasuke said defiantly to the man, get lost. Those swords don't belong to you, the man replied, coughing lightly. She doesn't have to give them to you. Sasuke growled in frustration and walked away. Naruko shook her head at the Uchiha boy. Thanks, man, Naruko said, nodding at the sickly man. No problem, the man replied, still coughing. My name is Hayate. I understand how important a sword can be to someone. A fellow swordsman, huh? Naruko said, intrigued. Hayate nodded in acknowledgement. Well, if I get a team, I hope it's with you. I could use some sword techniques myself. Hayate smiled and returned to the group of jonin. Now that that's settled, Iruka called out, bringing everyone's attention back to the event. It's time for the taijutsu portion. Sasuke smirked at Naruko. He knew that this would be his opportunity to show he was superior and take those swords from her. Iruka came back out holding a small device with a large ball filled with smaller balls. Whoever's name comes out of these two balls, Iruka explained, will fight in a taijutsu match. Understand? The students nodded. All right, then. Let's begin. Mizuki turned the crank on the device, and after a few moments, the names Kiba Inuzuka and Kuji Akamiki appeared. All right. Kiba cheered, let's take on the big guy. Kuji, who had heard that comment, growled and stomped toward the sparring ring, causing small cracks in the ground with each heavy step. Kiba quickly followed, ready to face his opponent. Begin. Mizuki announced. Kiba charged in, but Kuji threw a powerful punch just as Kiba approached, landing a direct hit to Kiba's face. Kiba fell to the ground, and Kuji sat on him, rendering him unable to continue. Kuji was declared the winner, though Kiba still struggled beneath him. The next pair of names were Sakura Haruno and Ino Yamanaka. The two girls quickly got into a fierce, competitive match, full of shouts, pushing, and pulling. It was more of a rivalry than a martial arts battle. Most of the boys were watching, but Naruko didn't pay attention. She thought it wasn't a fitting way for Kunoichi to behave. Sasuke, on the other hand, wasn't interested either, as he saw it as a pointless rivalry. The next match was between Shikamaru Nara and Shino Aburame. Shikamaru, known for his lazy genius nature, withdrew immediately after the match began, making everyone's sweat drop at his lack of effort. There were three things people generally knew about the Nara clan. 1. The men of the clan were extremely lazy. 2. They were often outsmarted by their wives. 3. They were usually brilliant strategists. The match ended quickly with Shikamaru's withdrawal. The remaining matches were relatively uneventful, and soon the final match was announced, Naruko Uzumaki vs Sasuke Uchiha. Sasuke smirked arrogantly, confident that he would finally defeat Naruko and prove his superiority. Now I'll show everyone that I'm the top dog, Sasuke thought. Wait, did I just think like Kiba? Shaking off the thought, Sasuke ran to the sparring ring. Naruko walked over casually, leaning her swords against a nearby fence. Go Sasuke! One of the Uchiha fangirls cheered. Yeah. Tear that dead lass down to size. Another fangirl shouted. The girls continued to cheer for Sasuke, oblivious to Naruko's talents, despite her impressive performance earlier. Some people found it hard to accept that someone they once thought was the weakest could actually be the most skilled. I'll bet a week's pay on Sasuke winning, one of the jonin said. I'll bet a month's pay on Naruko, Guy said, shocking everyone. I'll take Guy's bet, Kakashi added, putting his book away. Others, including Kurenai, Asuma, Genma, Hayate, Anko, and Yugao, agreed to bet on Naruko for a month's pay. Ready? Mizuki asked, his voice cutting through the tension. Begin. Sasuke charged at Naruko, who stood her ground, waiting for the right moment. Just as Sasuke attempted to strike, Naruko leapt into the air, dodging his punch with ease. She landed behind him and delivered a powerful blow to his back, causing Sasuke to cry out in pain. Oh no, Sasuke! Sakura and Ino cried out in concern. Sasuke stumbled as she felt intense pain spread through her back. She turned and glared at the blonde who was grinning widely. Sasuke charged again, yelling out a battle cry. Naruko crouched and unleashed a strong uppercut. It's over, Guy said. Everyone looked at him and then looked at Naruko. The blonde jumped up after Sasuke and gave her a few more punches. Then Naruko brought her hands together and slammed them down on Sasuke's head. The Uchiha was sent crashing to the ground. Naruko lifted her leg, still in mid-air, and dropped it onto Sasuke. The girl cried out in pain as Naruko's heel crashed into her stomach, sending her deeper into the ground. At that moment, Sasuke lost consciousness. Naruko walked off the field, smirking at her victory. Naruko! Came the angry yell of both Sakura and Ino. Naruko saw the two girls charging toward her. Naruko just stood there. The two swung, and Naruko promptly caught both fists, bending their arms behind their backs and pushing their faces into the dirt. Listen, you two, Naruko said firmly, I don't care who you think you are or who you think will marry you in the future. If you try that again, you'll only find a few bruises. Do you understand? The two whimpered, why yes. Good, Naruko said in a much kinder tone as she released them. The class then entered the school to go back to the classroom for the final portion of the test. Those who had bet on Naruko turned to the ones who bet against her. You guys owe us each a month's pay, Kakashi said, smirking behind his mask. The ones who had lost the bet were crying anime-style tears, lamenting their loss of a large amount of money. Back in the classroom. Naruko was looking around, but she couldn't find her little friend. It was then that she noticed that her little fox wasn't with her. She looked around and heard giggling. She located the source. A couple of girls were cuddling the little fox, who seemed to enjoy the attention. When the fox saw Naruko, it yipped happily and ran over to her, rubbing against her leg. Is that little cutie yours? One of the girls asked. Yes, Naruko answered, picking the fox up. What's her name? Another girl asked. Naruko hadn't really thought about a name before. She thought for a few moments. I'm thinking Hitomi, Naruko said. The fox yipped happily at the name. Okay, Hitomi it is. All right, everyone, take your seats, Iruka said as the group began to disperse. For the final portion of the test, Iruka said, you will be tested on the 3 basic jutsu. Naruko smirked as she heard this. She had always had trouble in the past with the clone jutsu. However, since she had a new technique, she was confident it would work this time. Naruko was shaken from her thoughts when Sakura walked out of the examination room with a headband on. Naruko groaned at the sight. Sasuke was called in next, and a few minutes later, she came back out wearing a headband. Naruko groaned again as she cringed, hearing her fan club scream in happiness. Naruko, Iruka called. Naruko walked in and stood before Iruka and Mizuki. All right, Naruko, Iruka said, first, transform into someone. Naruko transformed into the 3rd Hokage. She didn't want to reveal all her abilities just yet, so she decided to use a regular transformation. Naruko could sense Iruka's surprise and Mizuki's slight frustration. Good, Iruka said. Now, perform a replacement. Naruko disappeared in a puff of smoke, and in her place was a chair. Mizuki cried out when she was suddenly lifted off the ground by Naruko. She cried out again when she was unceremoniously dropped onto her bottom. Iruka was doing his best not to laugh and was failing at the moment. Very good, Iruka said, writing down the results while Mizuki retrieved her chair and sat down, glaring at the blonde. Now, perform the clone jutsu. Iruka-sensei, Naruko asked, does it matter what kind of clone it is? No, Iruka answered with a raised eyebrow. Naruko formed a cross-hand sign, and 4 copies of herself appeared in a puff of smoke. Iruka dropped his pencil, and Mizuki's jaw nearly hit the floor. All the Narukos grinned at their stunned expressions. Congratulations, Naruko, Iruka said, smiling broadly. You pass. He handed Naruko her headband, and she placed it on her head. She walked out, and Kiba came up, grinning. All right, you passed, Kiba yelled, giving Naruko a high five. Yeah, Naruko said, I guess 3rd time's the charm. Seems that way, Kiba said, smirking. Well, Naruko said, since I don't have anyone to wait for, I'm going to bed. Hey, Naruko, Kuji called out, noticing Naruko leave. Don't forget, we have to come back for the team assignment in 2 days. Naruko nodded and waved goodbye to her friends. As she headed for the door, she walked past Sakura and Ino. Both girls flinched, expecting Naruko to hurt them or something. Ladies, Naruko said simply as she walked past. The two exchanged a glance and then turned their attention to where Naruko had gone. What a strange girl, they both said. Naruko walked home, ignoring the stares as she made her way back. When she arrived home, she saw a package at her door. Naruko raised an eyebrow. She rarely received gifts from anyone. Most of the things she had gotten before were traps made by angry ninjas. Naruko stepped over it and, after checking to make sure no one was looking, she used her chakra to lift it inside. She laid it down on the table and scanned it carefully. She didn't sense anything unusual. To be on the safe side, she unwrapped it slowly. When she saw what was inside, her eyes widened in shock. In the box were the 2 lightsabers she had ordered from the old man at the weapons store. They were different from regular lightsabers, though. They still had the cylindrical shape, but there was a grip that had a part going over the fingers to prevent accidental activation. The top of the cylinder had a small red button, and below it was a black switch. Naruko took one into her grip. She pressed the switch, but nothing happened. She then pressed the red button, and a crimson energy blade shot out with a snap hiss. The blade resembled the shape of an actual sword. Naruko then noticed a note at the bottom of the package. She picked it up and began reading. Dear Naruko. Yes, I know who you are. Since I had to make some adjustments, I decided to improve a few things. The piece for your fingers to fit through should help with your grip. If it becomes uncomfortable, you can remove it. The red button is for activating the blade, and the black switch changes the color of the crystals. I found an old scroll that I believe my grandfather had, which contained information on the colors needed. You have no idea how challenging it was to track down some of these colors. On another note, since these weapons seem to resemble the Raijin, I decided to model the blade after that. I hope you find them to your liking. I'll leave you with a quote from my favorite TV show, Live Long and Prosper. Oh, and before I forget, there's a small attachment in the box that will allow you to connect these to the back of your belt. Your jacket is just long enough to hide them. Signed, Dan, aka the old man from the weapons shop. Naruko smiled as she read the letter. She was surprised that the old man knew who she was, but she was also happy to have someone who wouldn't overcharge her. It brought a sense of comfort. Naruko located the device, which was essentially a belt buckle with 2 rings. She attached it to the back of her belt and placed the lightsabers onto it. Alright, Naruko thought, I think I'll test these out on Mizuki tonight. Just kidding, I'm not that evil. As the night fell, Naruko sensed a disturbance in the air and quickly leapt out of her window. She activated the thermal vision from her prototype bloodline, scanning the area until she spotted a lone figure with a large scroll on his back heading toward the forest. Naruko smirked, sensing an opportunity to try out her new abilities. With the traitor. Mizuki mentally laughed as he thought he had escaped his pursuers. Finally, Mizuki thought with an eerie grin, with the power of the Forbidden Scroll and Orochimaru-sama's strength, I will be unstoppable. Of course, you'll still need to escape first, a voice in his head said. Before Mizuki could process that someone else's voice had just echoed in his mind, he was struck in the back. He screamed as he was thrown into a tree. He looked up to see Naruko perched on a tree above him. You, Mizuki yelled, how did you find me? It wasn't that difficult, Naruko said with a grin. I can smell insanity from a mile away. Mizuki suddenly smirked and looked up at Naruko. Naruko, Mizuki sneered, do you want to know why everyone dislikes you? Why they ignore you? I'm curious, Naruko replied, already expecting where this conversation was heading. Why? 13 years ago, Mizuki explained, the 9-tailed fox attacked our village, as you know. You also know that the demon was killed, but that's a lie. The Yondaime couldn't kill it, so he sealed it inside a newborn child. He sealed it inside you. You are the 9-tailed fox that attacked our village. Naruko stood in silence. Just as Mizuki had hoped, Iruka arrived, too late to stop him from revealing the truth. Both Iruka and Mizuki looked at Naruko, waiting for her reaction. To everyone's surprise, Naruko began to laugh. What's so funny? Mizuki demanded. Nothing, Naruko replied, still laughing. It's just that you think I'm the fox. You must be as foolish as you look. I've known about the fox for a while. I figured it out long ago. I'm not the fox, and I know that much. Mizuki was stunned. He had expected Naruko to panic, deny it, or perhaps break down. But she remained calm, which completely threw him off. I also know, Naruko continued, that I'm supposed to protect my village and deal with traitors like you. You can't defeat me, Mizuki shouted, pulling a Fuma shuriken from his back and throwing it at Naruko. She simply sidestepped it with ease, grinning confidently at him. At that moment, the Hokage appeared, accompanied by a group of loyal Anbu. Hey, old man, Naruko called out, you're just in time for the show. I wouldn't dream of missing it, Naruko. The Hokage called back. Hokage-sama, are you out of your mind? Iruka asked, concern filling his voice. Mizuki will hurt her. Actually, the Hokage replied, I'd be more concerned about that traitor. Naruko, feel free to use your special abilities. The Anbu and Iruka exchanged confused glances but remained silent, watching with increasing curiosity. Mizuki growled and threw another Fuma shuriken at Naruko, but she didn't even flinch. With a calm motion, she held out her hand, and to everyone's surprise, the shuriken stopped in mid-air. The crowd gasped in shock. The Hokage looked on with interest. Naruko launched the shuriken back at Mizuki with a forceful push. The shuriken zipped toward him so fast that Mizuki had to leap to the side to avoid it. Is that all you've got? Mizuki taunted. Not even close, Naruko yelled back, leaping after him. Naruko closed the distance and reached out her hand. The next thing anyone knew, she fired several bolts of lightning from her hand. Mizuki screamed in pain as the electricity coursed through him, sending him crashing to the ground, twitching slightly from the shock. The onlookers couldn't believe what they had just seen. Several Onbu members were pinching themselves, making sure they weren't dreaming. Naruko crossed her arms as Mizuki struggled to rise, glaring at her with fury and madness burning in his eyes. You brat, Mizuki shouted, no fresh out of the academy Jinan is going to defeat me. Mizuki transformed, growing larger until he was twice his normal size. His body became covered in orange fur with black stripes, and he charged at Naruko with a savage growl. Naruko reacted quickly, leaping over him and shifting her arm into a claw form, swiping at Mizuki's back. Mizuki jumped to avoid the attack and retaliated with a hard punch that sent Naruko crashing into a tree. A small jolt of pain shot through Naruko's arm, but she quickly recovered. She twisted her arm, cracking it back into place and glared at the creature before her. Okay, tiger boy, Naruko muttered, you're really starting to annoy me. She shifted her arms back to normal, pulling out her two lightsabers from behind her jacket. Mizuki laughed menacingly, what are those supposed to do? Toys? Snap hiss. Mizuki's eyes widened as he saw the two Raijin blades in Naruko's hands. The onlookers shared the same stunned reaction. The only person who wielded weapons like those was the Nidaime. How did Naruko acquire two of them? Before you ask, Naruko said, reading everyone's minds, these are based on the Raijin blades. Or at least, I think that's how it went. Anyway, back to business. Naruko rushed at Mizuki, her lightsabers drawn. Mizuki swung his claws, and Naruko met him with the flash of her blades. The two clashed, each landing near miss strikes. Tension filled the air before several slash marks appeared on Naruko's chest. Mizuki smirked, thinking he had gained the upper hand, but suddenly, his arm fell off. He screamed, clutching the stump in shock as he reverted to his normal form. Naruko stood tall, black and red tendrils swirling across her chest, healing her wound as if nothing had happened. She turned to the Hokage. Hey, old man, Naruko said, isn't there a law about mentioning the Kyuubi? Yes, the Hokage said, smirking, the punishment for that is severe. I believe Mizuki broke the law when he started this fight. Permission to proceed? Naruko asked, her voice steady. Granted, the Hokage said, his voice calm but with a slight smile. Naruko grinned as she walked over to Mizuki, who was in significant discomfort. The man was too weak to resist. Naruko gently placed a hand on his head, using her abilities to extract information from him. She gathered all the details she could about the mysterious Orochimaru. However, just as Naruko was about to proceed, she sensed something strange. Her instincts told her that there was something dark within him, a force that could potentially overpower her. Naruko hesitated for a moment, realizing that consuming Mizuki might be dangerous. A new idea formed in her mind. Naruko placed her hand on Mizuki's chest, and suddenly, red and black tendrils spread over his body. Mizuki groaned in pain as the tendrils surrounded him, but Naruko wasn't consuming him directly. Instead, she used the tendrils to break him down, carefully using her abilities without letting the darkness take hold. Mizuki's cries faded away as the tendrils withdrew, leaving only a few remnants behind. With the situation handled, Naruko walked over to the forbidden scroll, picking it up. She handed it to the Hokage, who smiled in appreciation. Congratulations, Naruko, the old man said warmly. You've successfully completed your first mission. You'll be rewarded as though it were an A-ranked mission. Now, go home. I need to speak with my Anbu and your teacher. Naruko nodded, grateful for the recognition, and swiftly leapt into the trees, making her way back home. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. That's all for this part. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more exciting videos coming your way. Love you all, and as always, stay tuned for more Anime Dreams.